Hey folks, welcome back. I know it's been a while since my last video. My usual excuse, I have been very busy. Lots of travel for work, and I am getting ready for another big sweep of traveling. It's going to start in a few weeks, but I do have a little bit of breathing room on this lovely Friday afternoon, so I thought that I would do another video. Not sure that the Jihad opening videos were terribly popular, but I did want to provide just a coda to that ordeal. As I said in the video, the story there was I bought a box of Jihad booster packs on eBay that had no vampires in them, and I think I told the story of Wizards of the Coast response to that in a video a while ago, or Wizards of the Coast sent me a box of Magic cards. That was actually pretty cool. And then I also mentioned in a previous video that this outfit called Rose Tattoo Productions, which I linked to in one of the Jihad videos. I can't remember actually how I got in touch with that guy, but I think I posted on some sort of VTS, that's Vampire the Eternal Struggle, message board about my troubles, and he may have messaged me directly and offered to help me out. But basically, in addition to that guy's website, in addition to having a lot of pretty good deals on some classic VTS and not so classic VTS cards, I think at this point all VTS is classic since it's been out of print for so long. But he, I did buy a box of Jihad boosters from him that worked, but he also sent me some of these demo decks. I'm not going to open these and go through them. I'm probably sick of seeing vampire cards at this point, but these are decks that are basically made up entirely of commons, from what I can tell. There's one for each clan. I don't have all of them in front of me. But they are, I'm not going to say they're all commons, but they're basically, they're not, he didn't send me a bunch of really highly valuable cards. I don't think any of the Jihad cards are that valuable at this point anyway. But these are playable, and they're lots of fun, and, he sent them to me out of the goodness of his heart, in large part to get me to sort of foster my interest in Vampire, which, due to the fact that the game is no longer in print, the people who still play it have an interest in sort of fostering and expanding the interest in it. He also suggested that I get in touch with the people here where I live who play it, which I did do. I haven't actually gotten together with them yet, but I am working on that. And they also sent me a stack of these Vampire Elder Kindred Network membership cards. And I think I did actually go on and sign up for this, or at least to the extent that I could, given the fact that it's kind of a dead game. Dead vampires. So anyway, that was a really nice thing to do, and I'm really appreciative of that guy. And Dave, if you are watching, thank you very much again, and I will link to you once again in my description. So, on to the purpose of this video, which is something that I've been wanting to do really since I started this channel. I wanted to kind of go through some of my favorite artists from the mid-90s. As I've mentioned many times before, in many videos, Quinton Hoover was my favorite artist, and this is one of my favorite illustrations, and I'll get to that in a minute. But just to set the context, if I can, for my thoughts on magic art, this is starting to sound really arrogant and stupid, so I'm going to adjust my tone. I apologize for that. If you look... drinking a lot of water because I'm trying to avoid throat clearing, because I know that bothers people. If you look at the cards that are being put out today, the artwork is great. I have no qualms with the artwork, but it's also pretty uniform. I know I'm probably going to get comments from people saying that, Stephen Belladin is much better than Ryan Barger and so on and so forth. And obviously there are differences, but two artists are alike. But if you look at, if you just kind of look at the way it's a good card. The artwork is put together. It all kind of follows the same format, and there's nothing wrong with that. Wizards of the Coast decided that they want all their cards to look the same, and that's great. But if you look back at the sort of 90s era, there was a lot more leeway in terms of how artwork was done, and there were a lot of different styles, and there was a lot of tolerance for that. And actually, I think I pointed out before, this is 4th edition. You can see that the copyright is actually Wizards of the Coast, Inc. The earlier editions, 3rd edition and before that, the copyright was actually in the artist itself, him or herself. So a 4th edition card, I probably actually have some in here. Yeah, here we go. So this card, if you look, you can see the copyright is actually to Quinton Hoover himself as opposed to Wizards of the Coast. And I think that's sort of indicative of the attitude toward artwork back in the 90s. The artists were freelance. They basically sold the rights in their artwork via license to Wizards to use in their cards, but they retained ownership in their artwork. And the reason that in the 5th edition, a lot of the artwork changed is because they stopped doing that and they started demanding full assignments from all of their artists. So rather than paying royalties for Quinton Hoover to, use this picture of Amber Kithkin over and over again, if they can continue this card, which you probably actually didn't, it's not that remarkable of a card, they just hired a new artist and did a whole new illustration. So anyway, I think it's cool to kind of look back at the older cards and admire the artwork, and just sort of, look at the different styles that were available at the time, and it sort of lends itself to people developing their own favorite artists. Mine was Quinton Hoover. I had other friends who had other favorite artists. So anyway, I just want to, probably not going to go through this entire stack in this video, but I will get going. I also wanted to point out that I think in an earlier video I mentioned that I had an autographed version of this card, this Amber Kithkin card, which I really liked. I will admit now that one of the reasons I liked this artwork so much back when I was a teenager was because she looks a lot like a girl I had a crush on when I was in high school. So there you go. That's my confession to you. But I still think it's a cool illustration. I think it's really neat because it's well drawn. I also think it's funny that it's this is a battle card. It's a creature that attacks and blocks. It doesn't have any special abilities other than not being able to be blocked. But he drew it. He drew the picture in this very peaceful setting. She's just kind of sitting in front of a puddle playing with a stick as opposed to attacking anything, which I think is kind of funny. But because I like this artwork so much, I did send a version of the card to Mr. Hoover himself and asked him to autograph it back in the 90s, and he did, and I found it. I had lost this, but it turned up in a box of trinkets in my house, along with some other stuff. So this is the Legends version of Amber Kithkin, and you can see, again, the copyright is in Quinton Hoover, not Wizards. You can see he signed it in this sort of silver metallic ink, which is pretty cool. You know what? I'll just take it out. What the hell? It's not worth anything other than my enjoyment, and I can enjoy it with or without the sleeve. So you can see there's the autograph by Mr. Hoover, and I think, as I recall, he included with it a letter, which I probably kept for a while, but have since thrown away, that explained that the 4th edition had just come out when I sent this to him, and he actually said that the 4th edition version with the purple clothes is actually more true to the original. And I did kind of agonize over which version to send to him, and I decided to ask him to autograph this, but I decided on the Legends because it was, a legend, and it was more rare, black border, and all that garbage. So there it is. It is resurfaced. I'm going to keep it here in my office as a little curio for people to ask me about when they come into my office. Not that anybody ever does. So I just spoiled the other artists that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm just going to go through. At this point, I probably only have time for a few more. I'm going to just go through some of my favorite Quinton Hoover illustrations. I like Quinton Hoover's style because it was very distinctive in that he uses what appear to be colored pencils as opposed to paint, which is what other people seem to use. And again, we're probably going to get a comment saying that I got that totally wrong, but it does have a very pencil, hand-drawn comic book feel to it, and I think it's really cool. One thing you'll always notice about just about every Quinton Hoover drawing in which somebody's wearing clothes is that the clothes are wrinkled and billowy. I don't know why he does that, but it does add a nice texture to the drawings. And I've talked at length about this, so I'll move on. Pradesh Gypsies is another good one. Again, I think this is cool because he plays around with facial expressions here. You can see there's this guy in the back with the pipe is just kind of sinister looking. The woman is looking very alert, ready for battle, and the guy is actually looks like he's looking at the woman to see what she's going to do, and the horse also looks concerned. Another look at it. So a lot going on in this picture. The gypsies are not to be trifled with. Carnivorous plant. This is a good illustration of how really detail-oriented Hoover was. You can see, there's just a maze of vines and grass and vegetation. Lots of nice touches here. You can see the blood coming out of the mouth of this plant, this one plant in the front, and then the kind of strings of saliva as this plant opens its jaws. I suppose I thought this was really cool. You can really see yourself, a creature getting just kind of sucked into this and torn apart, which I always thought was cool. So Vesuvian Doppelganger, this is one of the more valuable cards back in the mid-90s. The Shivan Dragon was always the strongest creature in the 3rd edition and 4th edition, probably, but the Vesuvian Doppelganger, I think, at one point was actually more valuable, just because it has a really cool ability of being able to copy any other creature, but also reset itself at the beginning of your turn. So that was cool. This is, I think, if you look, he didn't actually use Photoshop for this. It looks like he actually drew them separately. You can see there's very slight differences in the wrinkles on the sleeve. There are differences in the texture in her chest here. So that's a pretty cool. But even so, it's mirrored, but it's not a perfect copy, which I think is actually nice. Again, it lends kind of a human touch to it, where you can see he didn't just draw it once and then use Photoshop to flip it. He actually drew the whole thing by hand, and the rays coming off of the crystal balls are different. Regeneration. Not a whole lot to say about this. It is a cool illustration. This guy is just zapping his arm back to life. This illustration was redone for Ice Age, I think, and it was a little different. It wasn't quite as dramatic. It was just kind of a guy holding his arm in front of his chest, and it was kind of similar in terms of one hand zapping the other hand into existence, but I think the new illustration just didn't have quite as much pizzazz, if I can use that word, and again, lots of wrinkled clothing. Earthbind. This has an interesting story behind it. This is actually one of my favorite cards. I'm not into fetish or bondage or anything, but the reason that this card is not in the 4th edition, I believe this was confirmed, was that because the illustration was deemed too risque or offensive. They didn't have. I guess they weren't redoing illustrations for the 4th edition at the time, so rather than redo the illustration, they just dropped the card, which didn't make a lot of sense substantively, because it's a very good card. It's a card that makes a lot of sense. It's a good defensive card. It kills a flying ability. But if you look at the way this card is drawn, she is very clearly in a sort of bondage pose. She's wearing almost no clothing, and I could see where they didn't want to have this necessarily in the game. And I will say, Quinton Hoover may have gone a little overboard with the bondage here, because if you look, just the term Earth Bind, it destroys the flying ability and does 2 damage. It does not paralyze the creature entirely, which is what's happening here. So a little overboard with the hand and neck restraints there. Excuse me. I have a dry throat in general, and we're having very dry weather, and I apologize. Anyway, yeah, so, it's a nice illustration. It's a little over the top, but whatever. Meddling Imp is another one of my favorite drawings by Quinton Hoover. Just really great detail in the musculature, the arms and legs. You can see the fingers are really highly, I don't know what you call that, just articulated, I guess. Each finger is doing something different. I think the toes in particular are a nice touch. The big kind of clunky feet. Not much more to say about the texture of the wings. I just think this is a really cool illustration, and also there's the detail of the melting candle and the pages of the book, and it's a really cool drawing. And actually, I'm just now noticing this, but the backgrounds of Dark Pact and Meddling Imp, I almost said Meddling Pimp, which is what we used to call it when I was a kid, are very, very similar. That's actually pretty funny. It's almost like Dark Pact and Meddling Imp are in the same place. That's a cool thing I never noticed before in 17 years. So, Dark Pact. This was a card that was removed from the 4th edition. They were really, even then, starting to move away from Ante. So this is an Ante card that you wouldn't play unless you were playing for Ante. I think at some point they eliminated Ante altogether because they didn't want it to be like a gambling game. So, which is a shame because this is a really good illustration. Again, lots of detail, really cool conceptualization of a dark pact. She's got some blood ritual going, using the candle and whatever's burning in this dish, and her own blood squeezing into it. I think the fingers in particular, how they're kind of tangled together as she's squeezing the blood out of her hand. The color of the blood matches the markings on her face, suggesting that she actually used her own blood, or somebody else's blood perhaps, to actually paint her face in preparation for the ritual. The headpiece, just really a lot of care and attention going into this, and also this little plant growing in the background, which is sort of incongruous. But hey. Nice contrast between this kind of lush green plant in the foreground of this dead tree out the window, as though she's the one creating life, creating something in her dark chamber here, as the outside world is dying. I think it's just really cool. Hoover, I would say, was also pretty good in terms of moving away from kind of classic sword and sorcery, which I mentioned before. The outfit she's wearing is almost Middle Eastern or Arabic in the way, the kind of billowing sleeves and this headpiece, the thing around her arm. Playing with the genre, playing with style, I think is something that Hoover was pretty good at. And then, ending on kind of a whimp rather than a bang, Thunderwolves. Again, just really cool detail. The wound here, texture is really good. This kind of dark gray background. I think this is not actually an Ice Age card, but it's just, again, it's a really well drawn piece of artwork that I kind of wish I hadn't ended on because I don't have a lot to say about this. So anyway, I didn't expect to spend 20 minutes talking about Quinton Hoover, but there you go. Yeah, these are, you'll notice this is actually the picture that I used for the background on my channel. I didn't have to point that out to you because you're probably staring at my channel right now. So yeah, those are my Quinton Hoover. Those are some of my favorite Quinton Hoover illustrations. There are some other ones I didn't get to. There's some from Ice Age I didn't pull out just because I was, didn't want to be taking forever on this. I guess I'll have to do other videos for my other artists, and don't know when I'll get to do that because, as I said, I'm very busy, and I'm about to head home because it's pizza night. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, and have a great weekend.